Most people think aging starts in the mirror. A wrinkle that wasn't there last month, skin that suddenly looks thinner, puffiness around the eyes, a softer jawline, stubborn belly fat, energy that never quite returns the way it used to. That's what we notice first. But what if aging often begins somewhere you can't see at all? Deep inside the brain and adrenal system, there is a stress signal designed to protect you. It's incredibly useful in short bursts. It helps you wake up, respond quickly, stay alert, and survive challenges. The problem begins when that signal stays switched on all day. Because when the body believes survival is the priority, it starts redirecting resources away from repair. It borrows from your future to get through today. Collagen production slows, skin recovery weakens, belly fat storage becomes easier, sleep gets lighter and less restorative, energy fades, motivation drops, healing takes longer. Many people assume that means they are simply getting older, but often it may be chronic cortisol. And this doesn't only happen after trauma, tragedy, or obvious crisis. It can happen through normal modern life. Constant pressure, poor sleep, rushing from one task to another, too much stimulation, carrying emotional stress, and never truly recovering. You may look fine on the outside while your biology is aging faster underneath. Today, I'll show you how this hidden hormone may be accelerating wrinkles, fatigue, stubborn weight gain, and faster aging. And more importantly, how to turn that signal around. And this is where things start to get interesting. And this doesn't only happen after trauma, tragedy, or obvious crisis. It can happen through normal modern life. Constant pressure, poor sleep, rushing from one task to another, too much stimulation, carrying emotional stress, and never truly recovering. You may look fine on the outside while your biology is aging faster underneath. Today, I'll show you how this hidden hormone may be accelerating wrinkles, fatigue, stubborn weight gain, and faster aging. And more importantly, how to turn that signal around. And this is where things start to get interesting. Maybe you wake up tired even after what should have been a full night of sleep. You were in bed long enough, but somehow you still feel unrefreshed, like your battery charged halfway and stopped. Maybe your face looks more drained lately. Not dramatically, just subtly. Less brightness in the skin, more puffiness some mornings, a look of fatigue that makeup, skincare, or a cold splash of water doesn't fully hide. Maybe the skin around your eyes seems thinner, your jawline a little softer, fine lines a little deeper than they were before. Maybe your belly has become harder to lose, even though you're trying. You're eating better than you used to. You're making an effort. But the midsection seems unusually resistant. Maybe little things irritate you more than they once did. A small delay, a message tone, someone asking one more thing from you. You feel on edge, but also exhausted. At night, your body is tired, but your mind keeps moving. Thoughts loop, plans replay, worries grow louder in the dark. Then morning comes, and instead of clarity, you feel foggy. So you reach for sugar, caffeine, or comfort foods just to feel functional. Your workouts don't seem to give you the same return they once did. Recovery takes longer. Motivation is lower. Results are slower. You bounce between being wired and depleted. And because life is busy, you may tell yourself, this is normal. This is just getting older. This is what adulthood feels like. But very often, these aren't random symptoms scattered across different parts of your life. They're connected signals. Your body may be living in stress adaptation mode. Instead of investing energy into renewal, repair, hormone balance, skin rebuilding, and metabolic flexibility, it may be spending that energy managing invisible pressure. That's why someone can look productive, capable, and high-functioning on the outside, yet feel older than their age internally. Many people never realize that wrinkles, fatigue, belly fat, mood shifts, and poor sleep can come from the same root system. But once you understand that connection, everything starts to make sense. I'm Dr. Christal, and over the years, I've watched something fascinating happen again and again in clinic. Two people walk in who are the same age on paper, yet biologically they can look years apart. One person has steady energy through the day. Their skin looks clearer and more resilient. Muscle tone is better preserved. They sleep well, recover well, and carry a kind of emotional steadiness that shows up in their face and posture. The other person, same age, may be dealing with accelerated facial aging, stubborn weight around the midsection, anxiety, poor recovery, lighter sleep, and constant fatigue that never seems fully explained. Same number of birthdays, very different physiology. And often, the difference was not genetics alone. It was stress load. Not always dramatic trauma. Not always one major life event. Sometimes it was caregiving stress that never let up. Work pressure that followed them home. Relationship strain that kept the nervous system tense. Financial stress simmering in the background. Years of poor sleep. Always being available. Always being on. I've also seen many people spend thousands on skincare, supplements, lab testing, and cosmetic treatments while overlooking the stress chemistry quietly working against all of it. They were trying to polish the surface while the internal signal remained unchanged. Then something shifts. They begin regulating nervous system load. They improve sleep timing. They add consistent movement instead of punishing exercise. They nourish the body properly. They create recovery rhythms their biology can trust. And suddenly the face starts to change. Energy returns. Weight becomes more responsive. Mood steadies. They often tell me, "I feel like myself again." That is why I take cortisol seriously, because it doesn't only affect how you feel day to day, it affects how you age over time. And many people are working hard to treat downstream symptoms, while the upstream signal remains untouched. So what's actually causing this? Is cortisol the villain in the story? Not exactly. Cortisol is not inherently bad. In fact, it is essential for life. You need it to wake up in the morning and feel alert. You need it to help regulate blood sugar between meals. You need it to respond to danger, adapt to challenges, and control inflammation at the right time. It helps the body meet the demands of daily life. Without cortisol, normal function becomes very difficult. So the issue is not cortisol itself. The issue is chronic elevation, poor timing, and a body that never fully returns to baseline. Think of cortisol like a fire alarm. If there is real smoke in the kitchen, that alarm is incredibly helpful. It gets your attention fast and tells you to act. But if the alarm rings all day, every day, even when there is no fire, it becomes disruptive, exhausting, and eventually damaging. That is what can happen in modern life. When stress becomes constant, even subtle stress, the body may begin interpreting life as one long emergency. Deadlines, notifications, financial pressure, poor sleep, emotional tension, overcommitment, constant stimulation. None of these may seem dramatic alone, but together they keep the alarm active. And when that happens, biology changes priorities. Repair becomes secondary. Survival becomes primary. That is when aging can quietly accelerate. To understand why, we need to look at what cortisol is designed to do, and what happens when the signal never turns off. Your stress response is largely controlled by a communication network in your body called the HPA axis. That stands for the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands. You can think of it as your body's command and response system. The hypothalamus, deep in the brain, is constantly scanning your internal and external environment. It's asking a simple question all day long. Am I safe right now? When it detects stress, whether physical, emotional, or even perceived, it sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which acts like a relay station. The pituitary then passes the message down to the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, and those adrenal glands release cortisol. Under normal conditions, this system is beautifully designed. In the morning, cortisol naturally rises. This is not a mistake. It's what helps you wake up, feel alert, stabilize blood sugar, and mobilize energy so you can start your day. Then, as the day progresses, cortisol should gradually decline. By evening, it needs to be low enough so another hormone, melatonin, can rise properly and guide you into deep restorative sleep. During moments of real challenge, cortisol also has an important role. It helps you focus, access quick energy, and respond effectively. It's a short-term performance and survival hormone, and once the challenge is over, it's supposed to come back down again. That rise and fall pattern is what keeps your system balanced. But modern life constantly disrupts that rhythm. Not one big stressor, but many small ones layered together. Late-night emails and notifications keep the brain alert when it should be winding down. Artificial light tricks your nervous system into thinking it's still daytime. Poor sleep quality prevents proper reset. Financial pressure runs in the background. Constant news and information overload keep the mind activated. Emotional stress is often suppressed instead of processed. Skipped meals or irregular eating patterns destabilize blood sugar. Too much caffeine pushes the system into overdrive. Overtraining without recovery drains resilience. And mentally, many people never truly switch off. So the body stops experiencing clear on and off cycles. Instead, it receives repeated stress signals throughout the day and sometimes even at night. Cortisol can become too elevated too often or spike at the wrong times entirely. And when that stress chemistry becomes chronic, the body begins to make adjustments to survive it. It shifts priorities. It essentially says, I'll deal with long-term repair later. But later never really comes. And that's when deeper systems start to suffer. Collagen production, metabolic balance, mitochondrial efficiency, and even hormone regulation itself begin to quietly decline. Now let's break down what's actually happening inside the body when cortisol stays elevated for too long. There are a few key biological systems that start to shift, and together they explain why stress can visibly and physically accelerate aging. First, collagen breakdown. Collagen is the structural protein that gives your skin firmness, elasticity, and support. Think of it like the scaffolding underneath the skin that keeps everything lifted and smooth. When cortisol is elevated chronically, it can increase processes in the body that break down collagen, while also impairing the production of new collagen fibers. Over time, that means the skin doesn't just look different. It becomes biologically thinner, less resilient, and slower to repair. Fine lines appear more easily, and healing from small stressors in the skin takes longer. Second, blood sugar regulation and belly fat storage. Cortisol's original job includes raising glucose availability during stress so you have quick energy to respond. That's useful in emergencies. But when cortisol stays high too often, it can contribute to insulin resistance over time. And when insulin signaling is disrupted, the body becomes more likely to store calories rather than use them efficiently. One of the most common storage areas is the abdominal region, particularly visceral fat around the organs. This type of fat is not passive. It actively releases inflammatory signals that can further disturb metabolism and stress balance. Third, sleep disruption. When cortisol remains elevated into the evening, the body struggles to transition into rest mode. Falling asleep becomes harder, sleep becomes lighter, and deep restorative sleep is reduced. That's important because nighttime is when key repair processes happen. Growth hormone rises, cellular repair signals activate, and tissues, including skin, muscle, and the nervous system, begin their restoration cycle. Without that deep sleep phase, recovery is incomplete. Finally, mitochondrial stress. Mitochondria are the energy-producing structures inside your cells. They determine how energized or fatigued you feel at a very fundamental level. Chronic stress chemistry can impair mitochondrial efficiency. This is where the tired but wired feeling comes from. You feel mentally activated but physically drained. Motivation drops, recovery slows, exercise feels harder than it should. And this is why stress doesn't just affect mood, it affects energy production itself. When you put all of this together, it becomes clear why prolonged cortisol imbalance can make someone feel and look older long before their actual age changes. What makes cortisol-related aging even more important to understand is that it doesn't operate in a straight line. It works in loops, interconnected feedback loops that quietly reinforce each other over time. For example, it often starts with something simple: poor sleep. When sleep is shortened or fragmented, cortisol regulation becomes less stable the next day. Your stress threshold drops and your body is more reactive. Higher cortisol then affects appetite signals, increasing cravings and hunger, especially for quick energy foods like sugar, refined carbs, or caffeine-driven stimulation. Those cravings lead to more unstable blood sugar throughout the day. And unstable blood sugar is itself a stress signal. So now the system is being pushed again, not just by external life stress, but by internal metabolic stress. At the same time, elevated stress chemistry often reduces motivation for movement. You feel tired, mentally heavy, or not in the mood to exercise. Less movement then worsens insulin sensitivity over time, making blood sugar regulation even less stable. That can contribute to increased abdominal fat storage. And here's where it becomes even more important. Visceral fat doesn't just sit there. It sends inflammatory signals back into the system, which can further disrupt sleep quality and stress resilience. So the loop continues. Then there's another cycle that's just as powerful. Stress accelerates visible aging in the skin. Subtle changes like dullness, fine lines, or loss of firmness. You notice those changes in the mirror, and that creates emotional stress, which in turn can raise cortisol even more. Now, the very thing you're worried about is feeding the system that caused it. And there's another loop that many people don't recognize at all. Fatigue leads to more caffeine intake just to function, but late or excessive caffeine can delay sleep onset and reduce sleep quality. And poor sleep then raises next-day cortisol again, so the cycle repeats. This is why so many people feel stuck, even when they are trying to do the right things. It's not always about discipline. Often it's about being caught in biology loops that reinforce themselves. And the important insight is this. Once you interrupt even one loop at the right point, multiple systems can begin to improve together. That's the real power of systems thinking in the body. When we zoom out, it becomes clear that this is not just about wrinkles or skin changes. Cortisol imbalance influences the entire system of how you function, feel, and even how quickly you biologically age. Start with energy production. When stress chemistry is constantly activated, your body prioritizes short-term survival energy over long-term efficiency. That can leave you feeling drained even after rest, because the system is spending more energy maintaining alertness than restoring reserves. Then there's focus and memory. The brain under chronic stress shifts into a scanning mode, always looking for problems, always alert. That reduces deep focus, slows down mental clarity, and can make memory feel less sharp over time. Mood regulation is also affected. When the stress response is constantly activated, emotional resilience tends to drop. Small frustrations feel bigger, patience shortens, emotional recovery takes longer. Appetite control becomes less stable as well. Hormonal signals that regulate hunger and satiety can become disrupted, leading to stronger cravings, more frequent hunger signals, and less predictable eating patterns. On a deeper level, immune balance is influenced too. The immune system and stress system are tightly connected. When stress is prolonged, immune regulation can become less efficient, meaning the body doesn't respond or recover as smoothly as it should. Muscle preservation is another key area. Chronically elevated cortisol can shift the body away from building and maintaining lean tissue and toward breaking it down for fuel when needed. Metabolic health also shifts over time. Insulin sensitivity can decline, fat storage patterns change, and energy use becomes less efficient overall. Even cardiovascular risk can be influenced through long-term inflammatory and metabolic strain. And all of this feeds into a larger concept, biological aging pace. When stress systems are constantly activated, the body operates in a higher wear and tear mode rather than a repair and renew mode. What people often notice in real life is subtle but important. They feel less resilient, both emotionally and physically. Stressful moments that once felt manageable now feel heavier. Recovery after illness, poor sleep, or emotional strain takes longer. Body composition changes more easily, even without major lifestyle changes. And over time, confidence can quietly decline, not because of appearance alone, but because of how the body feels to live in. This is why stress management is not a secondary wellness habit. It is, in many ways, a form of anti-aging medicine expressed through daily behavior. Because when you support the stress system, you are not just improving how you feel today. You are influencing how your biology ages over time. So what is actually driving cortisol to stay chronically elevated in modern life? The surprising answer is that it is often not one big traumatic event, but a constant accumulation of small, everyday stressors that the body never fully recovers from. One of the biggest contributors is simply sleeping too little. When sleep duration is consistently shortened, the stress system never gets a proper reset window. Over time, cortisol regulation becomes less stable, and the body starts to feel like it is always slightly behind on recovery. Even more disruptive is an irregular sleep schedule, going to bed at different times, waking at inconsistent hours, or shifting sleep patterns across weekdays and weekends. The brain thrives on rhythm, and when that rhythm is unstable, the stress system stays more reactive. Then there is constant digital stimulation. Notifications, messages, social media, and non-stop information keep the brain in a state of partial alertness. Even when you are resting physically, your nervous system may still be processing incoming signals. Emotional suppression is another major factor. When stress, frustration, or emotional tension is not expressed or processed, the body doesn't simply ignore it. Instead, it often holds it internally, keeping the stress response subtly activated in the background. A sedentary lifestyle also plays a role. Movement is one of the body's natural ways of metabolizing stress hormones. When the body remains still for long periods, stress energy has fewer outlets for release. On the opposite end of the spectrum, overtraining without adequate recovery can also elevate cortisol. Exercise is beneficial, but without balance, it becomes another form of stress load instead of restoration. Substances like excess alcohol can disrupt sleep architecture and recovery cycles, while too much caffeine can artificially extend alertness beyond what the nervous system can sustainably support. Modern dietary patterns, especially those high in ultra-processed foods, can contribute to blood sugar instability, which the body interprets as another form of stress signal. Social isolation also matters more than most people realize. Humans are biologically wired for connection, and lack of it can increase physiological stress load over time. Perhaps most importantly, many people never truly experience downtime anymore. Even rest is filled with input, scrolling, or mental planning. This creates a state of constant urgency, where the body feels like it is always on call, even during moments that should be restorative. Over time, this becomes the baseline. And when everyone around you is living the same way, it starts to feel normal. But common does not mean harmless. Your body does not measure stress by comparison to others. It measures it by physiological load, and it always keeps score. Now, the important question becomes, what actually helps bring this system back into balance? Because the goal is not to eliminate cortisol. The goal is to restore its rhythm. And that begins with something very simple, but very powerful: protecting your sleep timing. When you go to bed and wake up at consistent times every day, you are essentially retraining your internal clock. This helps recalibrate the natural rise and fall of cortisol so it starts peaking in the morning and declining at night again, the way it is designed to. Next is morning sunlight. Getting natural outdoor light within the first 30 minutes of waking sends a direct signal to your brain that the day has begun. This anchors your circadian rhythm and helps synchronize cortisol with your natural energy cycle. It is one of the strongest biological cues you can use. Then there is daily walking. Something as simple as a 10 to 20-minute walk has measurable effects on stress chemistry. It helps metabolize excess stress hormones, improves circulation, and supports insulin sensitivity. It is one of the most underrated tools for restoring balance. Strength training, done 2 to 4 times per week, is another key pillar. When applied correctly, it builds muscle, improves glucose control, and increases overall resilience. But if someone is already exhausted or overstressed, pushing intense training can backfire. The goal is adaptation, not depletion. Nutrition plays a central role as well. Meals that combine protein, fiber, and whole foods help stabilize blood sugar. And when blood sugar is stable, the body experiences fewer internal stress signals throughout the day. Then we have nervous system reset practices. Breathing exercises, prayer, mindfulness, journaling, or simply sitting in silence. These are not soft interventions. They directly signal safety to the brain. Even 5 minutes done consistently can begin shifting stress physiology over time. Reducing stimulant dependence is also important, especially caffeine later in the day. When stimulants extend alertness beyond natural limits, they often delay recovery cycles. And finally, in some cases, supportive nutrients may help the system function more efficiently, such as magnesium glycinate for relaxation pathways, omega-3 fatty acids for inflammation balance, and vitamin C for adrenal support. But the key point is this: none of these work in isolation. They work together to rebuild rhythm, because when rhythm returns, the stress system stops operating in survival mode and starts operating in repair mode again. Even when people start becoming aware of stress and cortisol, there are a few very common mistakes that quietly keep the cycle going. One of the biggest is trying to fix everything on the outside while ignoring what is happening inside. For example, focusing heavily on skincare, creams, serums, treatments, while completely overlooking stress biology. Skin health matters, of course, but if the internal stress signal remains elevated, the skin is constantly being repaired under pressure. It is like trying to fix the paint on a house while the foundation is still shaking. Another common pattern is increasing caffeine intake when the body is already overstressed. It feels helpful in the short term because it temporarily improves alertness, but biologically, it often pushes the nervous system further into a state of activation, especially if sleep is already compromised. Over time, this can deepen the fatigue cycle rather than solve it. Extreme dieting is another major issue. When calorie intake drops too low or becomes overly restrictive, the body can interpret it as a survival threat. That raises stress load, disrupts hormonal balance, and can actually make fat loss harder, not easier. The system begins conserving energy instead of releasing it. Hard workouts without proper recovery follow a similar pattern. Exercise is powerful, but when the body is already depleted, adding intense training without rest can reinforce stress physiology instead of improving it. The result is often more fatigue, slower progress, and increased cortisol burden. Even something as simple as doom scrolling before bed can have a significant impact. The brain interprets constant stimulation as ongoing engagement with the environment. That delays the shift into rest mode, suppresses melatonin, and can keep cortisol elevated later into the night. There is also a mindset issue that keeps many people stuck: the belief that rest is laziness. When rest is viewed as unproductive, the nervous system rarely gets permission to fully downshift. But from a biological standpoint, recovery is not optional. It is when adaptation actually happens. And finally, one of the most costly patterns is waiting until burnout to make changes. By the time burnout appears, the system has often been under prolonged strain. At that point, recovery takes longer and requires more intentional restructuring of habits and rhythms. The key realization is this: most of these mistakes are not about lack of effort. They are about misunderstanding what the body is actually responding to. Because when stress biology is not addressed directly, even healthy habits can accidentally reinforce the same cycle they are trying to fix. Here's the final section. The important part to understand is that change is not instant, but it is predictable when the system starts to rebalance. In the first 1 to 2 weeks, many people begin noticing subtle but meaningful shifts. Sleep starts to feel slightly deeper. Mornings feel less chaotic. Cravings may begin to reduce, especially those sudden urges for sugar or caffeine just to get through the day. It's not a full transformation yet, but the nervous system starts to feel a little less reactive. By weeks 3 to 6, the changes often become more noticeable. Energy becomes more stable throughout the day instead of coming in spikes and crashes. Mood begins to feel more even, less emotionally reactive. Bloating can start to reduce as digestion and stress signaling improve. There is often a quiet sense of steadiness returning that people haven't felt in a while. Between weeks 6 and 12, deeper physiological changes begin to show. The waistline may start responding more predictably. Workouts feel more effective again instead of draining. Skin tone can begin to look clearer and more balanced as repair processes improve. Recovery after stress or exercise becomes faster and more efficient, and over 3 to 6 months, the changes can become much more foundational. Body composition often improves in a more sustained way. Resilience, both physical and emotional, strengthens. Energy feels more dependable. There is often a visible increase in vitality that others can notice as well. But one of the most important truths is this: the timeline is deeply individual.